It's estimated that as many as 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a loss. In Allen County alone, based on last year's birth rates, that would be an average of 7 pregnancy losses every day. Yet it's a death that is often not talked about. We know tonight's discussion is hard to hear, both for people who understand losing a baby and for people who haven't experienced that grief. But we hope you stay with us. We'll discuss how together, as a community, we can all heal and honor those lives that ended way too soon. We hope the stories offer a sense of comfort and support for those walking through this kind of loss. It can be hard to know what to say when someone loses a baby. That's why we'll also talk about what to say and do to support a family member or a friend, and what might seem helpful but isn't. Last fall, my second daughter, Joy Agape, was born sleeping at 25 weeks after pregnancy complications started at 16 weeks. Hundreds of people reached out to me on social media, most sharing their own stories of losing their babies too. I had no idea pregnancy loss was so common until it happened to me. It was so many of you sharing your stories that encouraged us to have this conversation tonight. We start with a Parkview Health maternal and fetal medicine physician and labor and delivery nurse. We sat down and discussed why losses happen and how they care for both the babies and their families.
Just kind of define the terms, the difference between a miscarriage and stillbirth, and when in the pregnancy those terms change.
Traditionally, most of us are going to talk about miscarriage as a loss that happens in the first trimester. And then we're going to say if there's a pregnancy where the heartbeat stops in the second or third trimester, we'll call it that a stillbirth.
How common is miscarriage and pregnancy loss?
Yeah, if you look at just miscarriage, if you start from going early on, it's estimated as high as 30%. That includes those very early ones. If you get to the point where you can identify a heartbeat on ultrasound, then the miscarriage risk is about 10%. If you start looking into that second trimester, third trimester, we usually quote in the US stillbirth risk of 6 in 1,000, with about half of those happening before 28 weeks and the other half after 28 weeks.
That is still a lot higher than what most people probably think.
Yeah, the thing is, it's something that most of us don't walk around talking about. In my own experience in talking to patients, if you share that experience with people, you actually find out a lot of people have gone through this just like you.
I wish more than anybody it didn't happen, but it is a reality, and it's just so hard for everybody. The nurses and doctors here are invested so much into our families that it's super hard for us as well, that we carry them with us for a very long time, if not forever.
You see this somewhat regularly.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult is that for you as a provider?
It's very difficult. It's actually the hardest part of my job, and I'm sure I speak for everybody here that it's the hardest part of their job. We cry with the patients sometimes. Sometimes we lock ourselves in the bathroom. You know, it's what we have to do.
Is there any rhyme or reason to why these happen?
But sometimes you can come up with some understanding. You could have things like the baby's not growing well, or a structural abnormality, or a genetic condition. But in many cases, you don't understand exactly why.
But most often it is not because the mother did something wrong.
That's a real big, I guess I call it misconception. I think the biggest challenge is whenever something happens with a bad outcome, it's very human to stop and think, what did I do to cause this? What did I drink? What did I eat? What did I lift? What activities was I doing? And that's always the first thing that many people think about. But in reality, very few times was any of this in somebody's control. It's definitely not what you desired. It wasn't anything that you intended. What's really happened is it's an association. You can have things that are recurring and risks that put you at a higher chance of having another loss. But you can also have experiences where you've had 1 or 2 kids with no issue, and then the next pregnancy you suffer a miscarriage or you have a stillbirth, and we're not able to always get an answer as to why. And so I sometimes will tell patients it's like the rug was pulled from under you.
How do you as a nurse change your care? What does your role look like when a loss is involved?
We go on their timeline. Nothing is rushed, and we hope that, they feel that nothing is rushed. We just meet them where they are, wherever that might be. Sometimes that's sitting at the bedside saying nothing. Sometimes that's crying with them. Sometimes it's laughing, because we do, and just walking them through that path. As far as the baby, we provide the same care that we would with any infant, although we do focus on a lot of memory making stuff, footprints and hand molds, feet molds. We have an artist that comes in and does a pencil drawing of the babies, simply because they're not going to be taking their baby home. And that's going to be the only thing that they have.
If we're well aware there's a condition that's going to be life limiting, I have to figure out what can I do to support this person going through the pregnancy. As complex sometimes as the medical discussion can be and the unknowns, maybe I think the more complicated thing is that emotional side of it. I think that's what separates us from just being like, this is an algorithm of treatment, to being, you're a physician. You know how to now individualize the plan, and you're trying to not only fix a medical problem, but you're trying to ameliorate or fix an emotional hardship as well.
What do you hope people watching this take away from this special?
That all the babies' lives matter, no matter what. And that's part of the nurse's job, is to hopefully get the parents and the families to believe that as well in the midst of their grief. That whether the baby was born live and only survived for a very short amount of time, or whether the baby was born sleeping, it doesn't matter. Its life was still valuable. And we want everybody to know that, and to take that away, and to acknowledge these families that have had loss. Talk about the baby, not by him or her, but by their name.
I would hope that maybe when people watch this, they realize that pregnancy loss is common. I would hope that they also take away from it that when somebody loses a child, whether it's very early in the pregnancy or just after delivery or anywhere in between, that the loss is a loss, and it's still something that you will grieve, that you will remember, that you'll think about. It's not something that just goes away, even though people don't talk about it. It's something that you carry with you throughout your life. It's a life-altering experience.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can get over it easily. The other thing I would say, things when I think about this, is people who maybe haven't experienced it, who are then put into a position where somebody mentions it to them. Sometimes the best thing to do is just say, I'm very sorry. Many times people want to say something that sounds nice and they don't know what to say, or that there may be terms like, well, you're still young, or hey, you have other kids, or things like that. And they don't mean it negatively, but it comes across in a negative context to the individual. So sometimes just a simple, I'm sorry, goes a long way.
Angel gowns are just one of the many things hospitals do to help parents make memories with their baby, even after he or she has died. To talk more about that, we have three guests with us. Corey McKenzie, Parkview Health's Maternal and Child Health Bereavement Coordinator. We also have John Swanson, a Parkview chaplain, and Lydia Hens, a licensed mental health counselor. The grief can be similar for losing a pregnancy, losing an infant, as it is to losing another loved one or friend. But the conversation around that death, I feel, is very different. Do you think it's a different?
100%, because people have never met the child. Sometimes dad has never met the child. And so there's that awareness that maybe this is a mythical kind of thing. And so people just don't know how to talk about mythical things that way. As much as mom is aware that this is a real death, because this is a real life, as a society, we are really bad at death, period.
Lydia, how do you counsel people through grief and letting people realize that they have the permission to feel all the feels?
First off, I always say there's no timeline, right? There are going to be moments you're sad, there are going to be moments you're happy, and you're allowed to feel whatever you want to feel for how long you need to. I think the number one thing that I talk to a lot of my clients about is naming their children. It's interesting how many people feel like they need to have permission to name their child.
What I wanted to talk about next is siblings. So let's start with the older siblings. What advice do you have for parents counseling their older children through the grief of the loss of an infant or pregnancy?
We locally have an organization called Noah Bears, and so all of our big siblings get to take home a teddy bear in honor of their baby that isn't coming home, and also reassuring parents that it's normal for kids to be very present and very sad or angry or tearful and feel that at whatever intensity, and then 30 seconds later be asking for a fruit snack pack.
And getting rid of us expecting them to feel a particular way. The other thing is Erin's House for Grieving Children in Fort Wayne is awesome.
Let's talk about siblings who might come after a loss. We call them rainbow babies, but how do we also not make sure that they don't feel extra pressure to somehow live up to filling this void of a baby who died and then they came along?
That term rainbow baby ends up being a really hard label because it comes with expectations, because you got to have another one to replace the one that you lost, and that one is me.
I love the concept of a rainbow baby. I love the concept that whole saying represents, if you will. But to put that label on a child, I think it's hard for them to always be the rainbow baby.
The other burden there is there are lots of people who don't have a child after the death. And so it becomes oh, you got a beautiful rainbow baby. We didn't get a beautiful rainbow baby. And so it creates that kind of pressure that's not helpful. It's part of that literacy thing, of being aware that sometimes there's deaths and there's another child, and sometimes there's death and there's not another child. And it doesn't mean somebody's blessed and somebody's not.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to remember that every child is a unique and individual person, and their stories are different, and we're responsible for carrying their stories and helping shape the experiences of each of our kids.
Let's talk about things that people say that they think are being nice and they're hurtful. That having other children does not take away from the loss of this child. But what are some other things that might seem like they're being helpful or nice, but can be hurtful that you've heard or heard about?
Aren't you glad they're in a better place? No, I would actually rather they were right here.
And any statement that starts with "at least" is only going to minimize the experience. At least we had our oldest. At least you didn't really know them yet. At least it was early. None of those statements are helpful.
On the flip side of that, what are some good things to say? Let's give people some tools to help a friend or a family member.
I start with "this is hard" with a period after it. We do so much comma, we do so much but, we do so much whatever. And to start with that acknowledgement that this is hard, period.
I think people have an idea that they're going to make you sad if they bring up your baby. And in reality, that's what most parents want. Like, I don't want my baby to be forgotten. Calling them by their names, remembering the days they were born or whatever days parents find meaningful to celebrate them, and bringing them up, because you're not going to make someone more sad by bringing up their baby.
What are some of the resources available to them for healing, for counseling?
So we have a pregnancy loss support group and also a pregnancy after loss support group that meets at Parkview.
And I obviously am going to be an advocate for therapy and finding a good support in that area. I think something that's often maybe minimized is the pregnancy after loss, if you do end up having another pregnancy, is how complicated that is. I say that sometimes loss steals the magic from pregnancy.
deciding how we want to talk about how many children or how many grandchildren we have is a very interesting thing. And do you trust the people that you're telling that to?